5 years after the war ended, the galaxy looked different. The old Galactic Coalition had been dissolved and replaced with the United Galactic Assembly. This new organization was built on a simple principle. All species were equal. No empire could dominate others. No species could be treated as inferior. President Seo Yun Huang stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, looking out at the stars. She was older now, with more gray in her hair and deeper lines around her eyes. But there was peace in her expression. Behind her, the assembly was in session, discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges instead of war. Hard to believe, isn't it? A voice said. She turned to see Admiral Minho Kang, now retired from military service. He wore civilian clothes and walked with a slight limp from an old injury. What's hard to believe? Seo Yun asked. That we survived, that we won, that we're actually building something better. Minho joined her at the window. After New Sol, I thought we'd all be dead within a year. We almost were, Seo Yun replied. But we showed them something they didn't expect. What's that? That monsters can choose to be merciful. The Sol system had transformed from a fortress into a center of learning. The Arbiter Memorial University orbited Earth, welcoming students from every species in the galaxy. They came to study history, philosophy, conflict resolution, and the sciences. The goal was simple: ensure the galaxy never forgot the lessons of the war. Captain Ji-Won Park commanded the exploration vessel, New Horizon. The ship was unique. Its crew was split evenly between humans and Veloxians. When the mission was first announced, many people on both sides protested. The wounds were too fresh. The hatred was too deep. But Ji-Won had volunteered for the assignment, and War Master Crixon's daughter, Veline, had done the same. Together, they proved that former enemies could become partners. The crew's first mission together had been tense. Humans and Veloxians ate in separate mess halls. They avoided each other in the corridors. They spoke only when necessary. But slowly things changed. A Veloxian engineer helped a human technician fix a broken system. A human doctor treated a Veloxian's illness. They started sharing stories about their homeworlds, their families, their hopes. By the end of the first year, New Horizon had the highest crew satisfaction rating of any ship in the fleet. Scholar Taeyang Yoon ran the cultural exchange program between Earth and Velox Prime. Every year, hundreds of humans visited the Veloxian homeworld, and hundreds of Veloxians visited Earth. They learned each other's languages, studied each other's art, shared meals and music. It was not always easy. Old prejudices died slowly. Some humans could never forgive the Veloxians for New Sol and New Busan. Some Veloxians resented humanity's victory and the changes it brought. There were protests, arguments, and occasional violence. But there was also progress. Taeyang watched as human children learned Veloxian martial arts from teachers who had once been enemies. He saw Veloxian students crying while reading human poetry about loss and hope. Slowly, painfully, the two species were learning to understand each other. Elder statesman Hyun-Sik Nam worked on the new Galactic Constitution. He was 80 years old, a veteran of the colony wars who had lived through humanity's darkest hours and brightest moments. The Constitution he helped write included important new laws. The Never Again clause stated that any species committing genocide or wars of aggression would face unified galactic response. Every member of the Assembly agreed to defend victims of aggression, but the Constitution also included the right to deterrence. Species had the right to develop weapons to defend themselves. The key was transparency. All military capabilities had to be declared and monitored. Most importantly, the Constitution established the Arbiter Council, named in honor of the ancient species. This council would mediate disputes before they became wars, and humanity held one of the 5 permanent seats. Youth Ambassador Min Seo Kang represented the generation that grew up during the war. She was 23 years old, born the year the war started. She had no memory of peace, only the fear and loss that defined her childhood. At the 5-year anniversary memorial, Min Seo gave a speech that was broadcast across the galaxy. Our parents fought so we could live in peace, she said. They showed the galaxy that humans are dangerous when threatened, but merciful in victory. They proved that the strongest thing is not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to restrain that ability. Now it's our responsibility to build something better than what existed before. She paused, looking at the gathered crowd. Humans, Veloxians, Trilaxians, Calithians, and dozens of other species. We can't change the past. We can't bring back the dead, but we can honor them by building a future where their sacrifices meant something. A galaxy where no species lives in fear, where differences are celebrated instead of feared, where the first response to conflict is conversation, not violence. The crowd was silent. Then someone began to clap. Others joined. Soon the entire gathering was applauding and many were crying. The breakthrough in arbiter technology came 6 months later. Researcher Minji Choi's team finally unlocked the complete database. The revelation was stunning. Humanity was not the only crucible survivor in galactic history. 5 other species had passed the test over millions of years, but humans were the first survivors to encounter an established galactic civilization. The Arbiter AI's final message activated when the database was opened. It appeared as a hologram in the research center, speaking in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. To the crucible survivors who chose mercy, you have proven worthy. We leave you our technology, our knowledge, and our burden. Guard the galaxy not with weapons, but with wisdom. Teach others what you learned in your darkest hour, that the greatest strength is knowing when not to fight. The technology the Arbiters left behind was revolutionary. Medical treatments that cured diseases affecting multiple species. Energy systems that eliminated resource scarcity. Terraforming tools that could transform dead worlds into gardens. Construction methods that made space stations and cities easier to build. Humanity shared all of it freely. Every species gained access to Arbiter technology, no strings attached. Some alien leaders asked why humans didn't keep it for themselves, use it to dominate the galaxy. President Seo Yun Huang's answer was simple. We fought a war to be treated as equals. How can we demand equality while hoarding advantages? We're all in this together now. Admiral Min Ho Kang, now an old man, visited the memorial wall on Earth one quiet morning. The wall listed the names of every human who died in the war. 140,000 names carved in black stone. He found the names of friends, students, soldiers he had commanded. He placed flowers at the base of the wall and whispered, "You didn't die for nothing. The peace you bought is real. I promise we'll protect it." On a frontier colony called New Tomorrow, something remarkable was happening. It was a joint human Veloxian settlement, the first of its kind. Children of both species played together in the streets, creating games that blended both cultures. They laughed in mixed groups, not caring about the differences that had once seemed so important. Their parents watched from doorways and cafes. Some remembered the war. Some carried scars, visible and invisible. But they were trying, building something new together. Captain Daejung Kim, now a Commodore and instructor at the Arbiter Memorial University, watched his young students, human, Veloxian, and a dozen other species working together on a project. They were designing a new type of ship, one that combined the best technology and ideas from multiple cultures. He thought about the journey that brought him here. The ritual combat where he refused to surrender. The war that nearly destroyed both species. The choice to show mercy instead of seeking revenge. "The slow, difficult path to peace, sir?" one of his students asked. "Are you all right?" Daejung smiled. "Yes, I was just thinking about the past. Do you regret it? The war, I mean." "I regret every death," Daejung replied honestly. "I regret the suffering, the pain, the hate. But I don't regret what we became because of it. We're stronger now, not because we know how to fight, but because we know when not to." He looked at his students. These young people who would inherit the galaxy. The Arbiters warned the galaxy not to provoke humans. That warning came too late and thousands paid the price. But from that tragedy came understanding. We showed the galaxy our capacity for destruction, but also our capacity for compassion. We're not the galaxy's conquerors. We're not its saviors. We're survivors who remember what it costs to fight and who choose peace whenever possible. He paused, then continued quietly. But if threatened again, we'll remind the galaxy why the Arbiters left that warning. We are human. We endure, we adapt. We survive, and we never, ever give up. Outside the university, stars shone in the darkness of space. Among them, ships traveled peacefully between worlds. Species that had once been enemies now worked together. The galaxy had learned its lesson. They had warned the galaxy not to provoke humans. The truth came too late. But from that late truth came something unexpected, hope. Captain Subin Yang sat in the cockpit of her fighter, the Wraith, and checked her instruments one final time. Around her in the launch bay, 49 other fighters prepared for the most dangerous mission in human history. They were going to capture War Master Crixon alive deep in the heart of Veloxian space. "This is a suicide mission," her wingman said over the private channel. "Probably," Subin agreed. "But if we succeed, we end the war. If we fail, we die quickly. Either way, it's better than waiting for them to come to Earth." Subin was 32 years old. She had been a test pilot before the war, flying experimental craft that most people thought were impossible. She was calm under pressure, brilliant at improvisation, and completely fearless. Admiral Minho had chosen her personally for this mission. The plan was simple in concept but nearly impossible in execution. 50 fighters would use quantum jump technology to enter Veloxian space. They would navigate through a fleet of 10,000 warships. They would breach the hull of Crixon's flagship. They would capture him without killing him. Then they would escape. "All fighters, this is Control." Admiral Minho's voice came through the speakers. "The galaxy thinks humans are monsters. Let's prove we're something worse. We're survivors who refuse to quit. Good luck." The fighters launched into space and vanished. Quantum jump technology allowed them to slip between normal space and quantum space, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. To Veloxian sensors, they simply did not exist. The mission lasted 72 hours. Subin's squadron moved through the Veloxian fleet like water through cracks in stone. When Veloxian ships detected unusual readings, they fired at each other in confusion. When their sensors showed enemy contacts, those contacts vanished before weapons could lock on. Subin lost 12 fighters in the approach. Good pilots, brave souls. She whispered their names to herself and continued forward. There was no time for grief. Grief could come later if later existed. Crixon's flagship was massive, the size of a small city. It had shields that could withstand nuclear weapons and armor thick enough to shrug off most human weapons. But Subin's Wraith was equipped with molecular disassemblers, the same tools that Colonel Nari Song had used on the station at New Seoul. She cut through the hull in silence. Behind her, 29 other fighters did the same. Inside the ship, human soldiers emerged wearing powered armor. The battle was brutal and fast. Veloxian guards fought with strength and courage, but humans fought with desperation and precision. Subin found Crixon in the command center, surrounded by his elite bodyguards. The War Master was enormous, covered in battle scars, wielding weapons designed to kill at a distance. He saw Subin and laughed. "One small human comes to kill me? Your species truly is mad." "I'm not here to kill you," Subin said. "I'm here to take you prisoner." The fight that followed was unlike anything the Veloxians had ever seen. Subin used zero-gravity combat tactics, pushing off walls and ceiling, never staying still. She used every piece of equipment in the room as a weapon. Chairs, cables, even the holographic projectors. She was smaller, weaker, and slower than Crixon, but she was smarter, and she never gave up. When it ended, Crixon was unconscious, bound in restraints and being loaded onto Subin's fighter. She had a broken arm, 3 cracked ribs, and burns across her back, but she had succeeded. "All fighters, mission complete," she broadcast. "Extracting now." The escape was worse than the approach. Veloxian ships, realizing their commander had been captured, threw everything at the fleeing humans. Subin lost 18 more fighters. By the time she made the quantum jump back to human space, only 11 fighters remained from the original 50. But they had War Master Crixon. While Subin executed her mission, events were unfolding across the galaxy. On Velox Prime, Crixon's daughter, Veline, had been planning her own mission. She was a young officer who had always questioned her empire's aggression. The war with humanity had convinced her that her people were on the wrong path. Veline had obtained the suppressed Arbiter records. She knew her father and the High Council had hidden the truth about humans. Now, with her father captured and the Empire in chaos, she made her move. She broadcast the Arbiter records to every Veloxian citizen. Millions of people learned for the first time that their leaders had knowingly provoked a species the Arbiters themselves had feared. The revelation caused mass protest across the Empire. Citizens demanded answers. Why had they been lied to? Why were they fighting a war that should never have started? Veline went further. She declared herself a rebel and called for the High Council to step down. Thousands of young Veloxians joined her cause. The Empire, so unified in its aggression, began to fracture from within. Meanwhile, Commander Jae-hoon-oh worked tirelessly to build a coalition for peace. He traveled to a dozen worlds, meeting with species who were tired of war. The Trilaxians joined immediately. The Calithians followed. 5 other species agreed to form the New Dawn Alliance. High Priestess Linara of the Calithians addressed the coalition in a speech that was broadcast across the galaxy. She was a being of living crystal, ancient and wise. Her voice resonated with harmonic frequencies that all species could understand. "We have watched humanity fight for 2 years," she said. "We have seen them show restraint we would not have shown. They strike only military targets. They take prisoners instead of executing them. They heal wounded enemies. When they captured War Master Crixon, they could have killed him. They chose mercy. If these are the monsters we fear, what does that make us?" Her words struck deep. Many species began to question why they had supported the Veloxian Empire. In a secret research facility, researcher Minji Choi made a discovery that changed everything. She found the location of an active arbiter facility, hidden on a dead world at the edge of charted space. Inside, she encountered an artificial intelligence that had been monitoring the galaxy for 50,000 years. The AI spoke to her in perfect human language. "You are the Crucible survivors. I have waited long to meet you." "Why did the arbiters leave?" Minji asked. "They ascended," the AI replied. "They evolved beyond physical form. But they left their technology for worthy successors. You have proven worthy, not through violence but through restraint. You have shown the balance they sought. Now I will ask you what they would ask. You have proven you can survive. You have proven you can destroy. Can you forgive?" The question was brought to Ambassador Donghyun Kim. He had replaced Ambassador Jiwon Lee, who had died in a Veloxian attack. Donghyun was younger, but he carried the weight of Earth's suffering. He proposed peace terms that shocked everyone. No demands for Veloxian surrender. No territory seized. No executions. Instead, he offered a treaty of equals. Demilitarization on both sides. Reparations for atrocities. Most controversial of all, a truth and reconciliation process where both species would acknowledge their crimes. War Master Crixon, held prisoner but treated with dignity, watched as human doctors saved wounded Veloxian soldiers. He saw human engineers helping rebuild damaged Veloxian colonies. One day, Captain Daejung visited him in his cell. "Why didn't you activate Ragnarok?" Crixon asked. "You could have won." Daejung looked at him for a long moment. "We could have killed your species, but we would have lost our humanity. What's the point of surviving if we become the monsters we fought against?" Crixon had no answer. Days later, the Veloxian High Council voted to accept human peace terms. The war was over. The colony of New Busan had been humanity's pride. Built on a planet with purple skies and 3 moons, it was home to 50,000 civilians. Farmers, teachers, engineers, children playing in streets lined with cherry blossom trees that Earth colonists had brought from home. It was a place of peace and hope. Then the Veloxian warships arrived. Torgon, son of War Master Crixon, commanded the attack. He was younger than his father and twice as cruel. After his father's defeat at Seoul, Torgon wanted revenge. He did not attack military targets. He attacked the defenseless. The bombardment lasted 3 hours. When it ended, New Busan was gone. 50,000 people were dead. Torgon broadcast the entire massacre across coalition networks. He wanted humanity to see what happened when they defied the Veloxian Empire. The images spread through human networks within hours. Parents clutching children, buildings collapsing into dust, gardens turned to ash, the purple sky choked with black smoke. On Earth, in her small apartment, specialist Yoonji Kim watched the broadcasts. She was a combat medic, trained to save lives under fire. She had lost her sister in New Seoul. Now she had lost her parents in New Busan. She sat in silence for a long time, tears running down her face. Then she dried her eyes, put on her uniform, and reported for duty. "Where do you need me?" she asked her commander. "Are you sure?" He replied gently. "You've been through enough." "I'm sure," Yoonji said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were ice. "Someone has to make sure our soldiers come home. And someone has to be there when we make them pay." Commander Jiho Shin received his orders personally from Admiral Minho. Jiho commanded the stealth destroyer Silent Fang, one of the ghost ships that had proven so effective. His crew was small but elite, each member hand-picked for their skills and their ability to make hard choices. "Find Torgon," Minho said simply. "Make an example." Jiho found him 2 weeks later. Torgon's fleet had retreated to a Veloxian colony world called Carax. The planet had no military value, just civilian infrastructure. Torgon felt safe there, celebrating his victory with his officers. What happened next became known as the Ghost Hour. For 60 minutes, every Valoxian military installation on Carax was destroyed. Barracks, command centers, weapons depots, communication arrays, all gone. But not a single civilian building was touched. Not one non-military Valoxian was harmed. The message was clear. Humans could reach anyone, anywhere. They could distinguish between soldiers and civilians. And they would respond to atrocities with surgical precision, not blind revenge. Torgon survived, but 20 of his senior officers did not. They simply vanished during the attack. Their bodies were never found. Torgon spent the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, jumping at shadows. The Coalition convened an emergency session. The peaceful Trilaxian ambassador, Melrock, begged both sides to negotiate. He was an elderly being who had seen too much war in his long life. "Please," Melrock said, his voice crackling through his translator. "This madness must end. Already hundreds of thousands are dead. Soon it will be millions. Both sides have proven their strength. Now prove your wisdom." But Warmaster Crixon rejected all peace offers. He stood before the council and declared, "Humanity must be exterminated for the security of the galaxy. They are too dangerous to be allowed to exist. We will not stop until they are gone." On Earth, General Borahan listened to Crixon's speech. She was a stern woman who had fought in the colony wars decades ago. She knew what it meant to make impossible choices. After the speech ended, she turned to her staff. "Authorize Operation Prometheus," she said. Operation Prometheus was controversial. It involved sending human military advisors to train other coalition species who felt threatened by Valoxian imperialism. Within weeks, 3 species secretly requested human help. The Calithians wanted to learn human tactics. The Trilaxians needed defense systems. A third species, the insectoid Myrmex, asked for weapons training. Human instructors taught them not just how to fight, but how to think. They taught decentralized command structures. They taught adaptation and improvisation. They taught the philosophy of defensive warfare, how to make an attacker pay such a high price that victory becomes meaningless. The Valoxians learned of this and were outraged. But they could not stop it. The Coalition Charter protected military alliances. Meanwhile, Professor Young-Ho Lee finally decoded the complete Arbiter records. He worked in a laboratory surrounded by ancient artifacts, pieces of technology so old that even the Coalition's historians had forgotten their purpose. Young-Ho was patient and thorough, spending months translating the strange symbols. When he finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he called for an emergency meeting with Earth's leadership. The Arbiters were not peacekeepers, Young-Ho explained to the assembled officials. They were survivors. Their civilization destroyed itself in war. They were the last ones left. They created something called the Crucible Protocol, a test for every species they encountered. "What kind of test?" President Seoyun Huang asked. "A test of balance," Young-Ho replied. "Species that were too violent were destroyed. Species that were too passive were deemed unfit for the galaxy. The Arbiters were looking for something specific, species that could be violent when necessary but wise enough to restrain themselves." "And humanity?" General Borahan asked. "Humanity was the first species to survive the test by refusing to be judged. The Arbiters tried to measure us and we broke their instruments. We were too complex, too contradictory, capable of extreme cruelty and extreme kindness. The Arbiters didn't know what to do with us, so they left a warning and disappeared." Young-Ho brought up the final Arbiter message on the holographic display. Everyone in the room read it in silence. "When the galaxy forgets the cost of war, the Crucible survivors will remind them. Pray they do so with mercy." Dr. Hannah Park translated this message to the Coalition. She broadcast it on all channels, explaining the history, showing the evidence. Some species listened with new understanding. Others dismissed it as human propaganda, but everyone heard it. The Valoxian response was to mobilize their entire military. 250,000 warships assembled for a final assault on Earth. Every Valoxian soldier, every ship, every weapon, all committed to one goal: the complete destruction of humanity. High Archon Veltheris addressed his empire. "We will end this threat once and for all. We will burn Earth to ash and salt the ground where humans walked. The galaxy will thank us for removing this danger." On Earth, Admiral Minho received the intelligence reports. His staff waited for orders. The numbers were impossible. Earth had only 2,000 ships remaining. The Veloxian armada was 100 times larger. Minho was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Activate Ragnarok Protocol." His staff exchanged glances. Everyone knew what Ragnarok was. It was humanity's final weapon, created in the desperate hope it would never be needed. It was a distributed network of antimatter bombs hidden in asteroids throughout Veloxian space. Thousands of weapons, each one capable of destroying a planet. If Earth fell, the Veloxian homeworld and every major colony would die with them. 40 billion Veloxian civilians would be annihilated. "Are you certain?" General Borahan asked quietly. "No," Minho admitted. "But if we're going to die, the galaxy will know the price of genocide. Maybe the next species to be threatened will be treated differently." The message went out to the Veloxian Empire. If Earth falls, your homeworld dies. Every colony dies. Your species dies. This is not a bluff. Stand down. War Master Crixon received the message. He laughed. "They won't do it. They're too moral, too soft. It's a bluff." But late at night in his private quarters, Crixon looked at the star maps showing his homeworld. He thought of his daughter, Feline, who had spoken against this war. He thought of his grandchildren playing in the gardens of Velox Prime, and for the first time he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The war room deep beneath the surface of Earth was cold and quiet. Admiral Minho Kang stood before a massive holographic display showing the Sol system and the surrounding space. Red dots marked Veloxian positions. Blue dots showed human ships. There were far more red dots than blue ones. "How many ships can they bring?" President Seo Yun-Huang asked. She had been in office for only 6 months when the war started. Now she looked years older. "Intelligence estimates 50,000, Minho replied. His voice was steady, but his eyes were hard. "We have 2,000 combat-ready vessels. On paper, we cannot win." "On paper," repeated Colonel Nari Song. She stood near the edge of the room, checking her tactical gear. Nari was small and thin, but she moved like a blade through water. She commanded the Ghost Division, Earth's most elite special operations unit. "Good thing we don't fight on paper." Minho nodded. "Project Guisin is ready. 12 stealth ships equipped with quantum phase drives. The Veloxians have never encountered this technology. Their sensors cannot detect us. What are your orders?" Nari asked. "Take New Sol back," Minho said simply. "Show them what happens when they murder our people." Nari's team consisted of 12 operators, each one a volunteer who had lost family in the New Sol massacre. They traveled in 2 ghost ships, vessels that bent light around them and emitted no heat signature. To any sensor in the galaxy, they simply did not exist. The Veloxian command station orbiting New Sol held 3,000 soldiers. It had heavy shields, automated defenses, and enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. The Veloxians felt perfectly safe there. They were wrong. Nari's team struck at night during the station's sleep cycle. They cut through the hull using molecular disassemblers, tools so precise they left no trace of entry. Once inside, they moved through the corridors like shadows. Their suits absorbed light and muffled sound. They communicated through neural implants, sending thoughts instead of words. The Veloxians never knew what hit them. One moment, guards stood at their posts. The next moment, they were unconscious on the floor. Nari's team used tranquilizer darts for the regular soldiers, but the officers who had given the order to fire on civilians received different treatment. They simply disappeared. In 6 hours, the entire station was secured. Not a single human casualty. 3,000 Veloxian soldiers were prisoners. The station's command center had been stripped of all intelligence data. But Nari left one thing intact: the security footage. She wanted the Veloxians to see exactly what humans had done. She wanted them to watch and understand. The footage spread through coalition networks within days. Alien species who had dismissed humans as weak now watched in stunned silence as the recordings showed human soldiers moving through a heavily defended station like ghosts. The Veloxians studied the footage frame by frame, trying to understand how it was possible. High Archon Veltheris watched the recordings in his throne room on Velox Prime. War Master Crixon stood beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. "How did they do this?" Veltheris finally asked. "I don't know," Crixon admitted, "but I recognize something in the way they move. They hunt as a pack. They adapt to every defense. They don't follow standard military doctrine because they don't need to. Every soldier makes decisions independently. But they work together perfectly. They are still weak, Veltharis insisted. One station means nothing. We will crush them with numbers. But Krixun was not convinced. He had seen Daijong refuse to surrender even with broken bones. He had seen the cold determination in Ambassador Jiwon's eyes. Now he saw this footage of human soldiers operating with machine-like efficiency. For the first time in his long military career, Krixun felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. Back on Earth, Dr. Su-Jin Yoon published her research paper. She was a geneticist who specialized in evolutionary biology. Her paper was titled Humanity: A Death World. Species. It spread through the scientific community like wildfire. The paper explained what most aliens did not understand about Earth. Humanity had evolved on one of the most hostile planets in known space. Earth had extreme temperature variations from frozen poles to burning deserts. It had violent weather that could kill in seconds. It had thousands of diseases, predators that hunted in packs and prey that had developed deadly defenses. But more than that, humans were persistence hunters. They did not need to be the fastest or the strongest. They simply never gave up. Humans could track prey for days, following it until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Humans could survive injuries that would kill most species. Humans could adapt to almost any environment. The paper included data that shocked the galaxy. Humans could operate in temperatures that would freeze or cook other species. They could heal from wounds that should be fatal. Their bodies produced adrenaline that temporarily increased strength and reduced pain sensitivity. They could go without sleep for days if necessary. They could eat a wider variety of food than almost any other species. But the most disturbing part of the paper was the conclusion. Humans evolved to survive the unsurvivable. They did not evolve to be warriors. They evolved to be survivors. And a survivor will do anything, sacrifice anything, endure anything to stay alive. The Veloxian High Council dismissed the paper as scientific speculation. They believed their superior strength and numbers would prevail. War Master Krixun ordered a full invasion of the Sol system. 10,000 warships assembled at the border of human space. The message Krixun sent was broadcast on all frequencies. Humanity's defiance ends now. Surrender or face extinction. We will turn Earth into ash and scatter your people across the void. This is your only warning. Earth's response was a single sentence, transmitted to every corner of the galaxy. You were warned. When the Veloxian fleet arrived at the Sol system, they expected to face Earth's small navy in open battle. Instead, they found something impossible. The entire asteroid belt had been transformed into a weapon. Admiral Minho Kang had spent 200 years preparing for this moment. Hidden among the asteroids were thousands of railgun platforms, each one capable of accelerating tungsten rods to 10% the speed of light. The platforms were automated, networked together, and impossible to stop once activated. The Veloxians flew into the belt expecting easy navigation. Instead, they flew into a killing field. Tungsten rods traveling at 30,000 kilometers per second tore through Veloxian shields like tissue paper. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The Veloxian formation fell apart in minutes. But the real advantage was not the weapons. It was the tactics. Veloxian ships relied on centralized command. Each ship waited for orders from the flagship before acting. Human ships operated differently. Every captain could make independent decisions, adapting to changing situations instantly. When the Veloxian flagship was destroyed by a coordinated strike, their entire fleet became confused. Human captains exploited this ruthlessly. They attacked damaged ships. They cut off retreat routes. They used the asteroids for cover and struck from unexpected angles. The battle that should have been an easy Veloxian victory became a nightmare. On the third day, with 7,000 ships destroyed and his fleet in chaos, War Master Krixun received Admiral Minho's broadcast. The human admiral's face appeared on every Veloxian screen. "This is your only warning," Minho said calmly. "Leave now, or we will show you why humans survived our world. You think you know war. You don't. War is what happens when we stop holding back." Krixun stared at the screen, and for the first time in his life, he felt true fear. The station hung in space like a giant wheel, spinning slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. Nexus Prime was the heart of the Galactic Coalition, where 47 different alien species met to discuss peace, trade, and laws. Today, the Great Assembly Hall was filled with creatures of every shape and size. Some had scales, others had fur. Some walked on two legs, others floated in the air. But all of them had gathered to watch the humans make their request. Captain Dae-jung Kim stood near the back of the hall, his hands clasped behind his back. He wore the crisp blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service, with silver bars on his shoulders that marked his rank. Next to him stood Dr. Hannah Park, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She held a data tablet close to her chest, fingers tapping nervously against its surface. At the center of the hall, Ambassador Ji-won Lee stepped forward to the speaking platform. The platform floated in the air, surrounded by holographic screens that showed his face to every delegate in the massive chamber. Ji-won was a man in his 60s, with deep lines around his eyes from years of patient negotiation. He had spent the last 20 years trying to gain respect for humanity in this council. Honored delegates, Ji-won began, his voice calm and steady. Humanity has been a provisional member of this coalition for 200 years. We have followed every law. We have contributed our science, our art, and our resources. We have asked for nothing but fairness. Today, we formally request full membership status. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some species nodded their approval. Others remained silent. But from the Veloxian section came a sound that made Dae-jung's jaw tighten. It was laughter. The Veloxians were the most powerful species in the coalition. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with thick purple skin covered in bony plates. Their eyes glowed with an inner light, and when they moved, the floor trembled slightly under their weight. They had the largest fleet, the most colonies, and the strongest voice in every decision. High Archon Veltharis rose from his seat. His voice boomed across the hall like thunder. Full membership? For humans? More laughter came from the Veloxian delegates. You are children who barely learned to walk among the stars. Your ships are slow. Your colonies are small. You have nothing to offer this great coalition except your amusing optimism. Ambassador Ji-won's face remained calm, but Dae-jung saw the slight tightening around his eyes. We may be young as a spacefaring species, Ji-won replied, but we have proven our value. Our medical research has saved millions across multiple species. Our engineers have improved station designs throughout coalition space. Your scientists copy what others create, Veltharis interrupted, waving a massive hand dismissively. Your engineers fix what breaks. You are useful servants, yes, but equals, never. Dae-jung felt his hands curl into fists. Lieutenant Taemin Choi, standing guard nearby, touched his arm gently in warning. Taemin was young but experienced, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had seen combat before Earth joined the coalition, in the colony wars that humans didn't like to discuss. The debate continued for hours. Some species spoke in favor of humanity. The Trilaxians, a peaceful bird-like race, praised human diplomacy. The Calithians, who resembled walking crystals, appreciated human art and music. But the Veloxians dominated the conversation, and their allies followed their lead. Finally, as the session drew to a close, War Master Crixon stood. He was Veltharis's military commander, covered in scars from 100 battles. When he spoke, his voice was cold. Perhaps we judge the humans too quickly. Let us see what they are made of. He turned to face Dae-jung directly. Human captain, I challenge you to ritual combat. This is legal under coalition law. If you win, your people gain respect. If you lose, well, we will know the truth about human weakness. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to Dae-jung. He felt his heart pounding in his chest. Ritual combat was an ancient tradition, usually used to settle disputes between individuals. Refusing would shame not just him but all of humanity. Accepting meant fighting a creature 3 times his size and strength. I accept, Dae-jung said clearly. Hana grabbed his arm. Dae-jung, you can't, he'll kill you. He might, Dae-jung replied quietly. But I won't give them the satisfaction of seeing us afraid. The combat took place in the station's arena, a circular room with energy barriers that prevented fatal injuries while still allowing real pain. Thousands watched through live feeds across the galaxy. Dae-jung wore light armor and carried no weapons. Neither did Crixon. This was to be a test of natural ability. The fight lasted less than 5 minutes. Crixon moved with surprising speed for his size. His first blow sent Dae-jung flying across the arena. The second cracked ribs. The third nearly broke his arm. But Dae-jung kept getting up. His face was bloody, his body screaming in pain, but he refused to yield. Stay down, Crixon roared. You have lost! Accept it. Daejung spat blood and stood once more. "I don't know how," he said through split lips. Something flickered in Crixon's glowing eyes. Confusion? Respect? Fear? But it vanished quickly, replaced by anger. The final blow sent Daejung into unconsciousness. When he woke in the medical bay, Hana was there. "You're an idiot," she said softly, but her eyes were wet. "A brave idiot, but still an idiot. Did we get the membership?" Daejung asked. "No, they voted it down. The Veloxians said your performance proved their point about human weakness." Hana paused. "But something strange is happening back on Earth." She showed him a message from elder historian Yumi Han. Yumi worked in the old archives, studying pre-coalition records that most people had forgotten. She had found something. The message read, "I've discovered sealed files from humanity's first contact with an extinct species called the Arbiters. These beings once policed the galaxy. They left a warning about humans before they disappeared. I'm sending the full records, but the key phrase is this: the humans are not to be threatened. They are survivors of the Crucible. They do not start wars, they end them." Daejung read it twice. "What's the Crucible?" "I don't know," Hana said. "But Yumi is trying to send this to the Coalition. She thinks it might change how they see us, it might have. But the message never arrived at the Coalition headquarters. Veloxian intelligence intercepted it. They discussed it briefly among themselves, then dismissed it as human mythology and propaganda. After all, what threat could humans possibly pose? 3 days later, news reached Nexus Prime that changed everything. The human mining colony on New Sol had been attacked. Veloxian warships had bombarded it from orbit. 3,000 civilians were dead. Men, women, children, all killed in a matter of hours. The Coalition called an emergency session. Ambassador Jiwan stood before them, his face carved from stone. "We asked for protection under Coalition law. You refused. We asked for justice. You denied it. We asked only to be treated as equals." He paused, and in that moment Daejung saw something new in the old ambassador's eyes, something cold and hard. "You have made your choice. Now we will make ours." Back on Earth, in a secret military facility deep underground, Admiral Minho Kang received his orders. Project Gwison, which had been in development since Earth joined the Coalition, was activated. Humanity had always known this day might come. They had prepared for it. The sleeping giant was waking up. And the galaxy was about to learn why the Arbiters had left their warning. But that warning had come too late.